with you. It's wonderful seeing all the kind words coming through on the chat and seeing faces from around the country. We're all getting used to this new Zoom era, and I wish I was able to gather with you in person, but this is a pretty good second best. And first and foremost, most importantly, I hope you're doing all right. I hope you're keeping safe and that you and your loved ones are getting through this all right. I know it's a challenging time for everybody. And at the same time, I'm convinced more than ever that it's going to bring the best out of us if we make sure that that's a reality. And that's why it's so important to me that we stay in touch, that I stay in touch with you, that supporters of our efforts stay in touch with each other. And that's what we have a chance to do through opportunities like this and through efforts like Win the Era. So we have created a nonprofit organization and a political action committee called Win the Era, whose purpose is to carry forward the values that animated our campaign. And while I'm certainly going to be putting a lot of my time and energy out there to make sure that we get the White House back into the right hands and get Joe Biden elected president, we're also going to be doing a lot of work on some of the races and efforts that are not getting the same level of attention. You'll remember that during the campaign, I always talked about how we can't treat the presidency like it's the only office that matters. We've got to pay attention to local office, to state office. And if there was ever a time to see how important that is, it's now, where because we don't have the leadership we need in the White House, we're seeing governors, we're seeing mayors, we're seeing unsung county and other local officials stepping up to deal with issues. And that's why it's so important that we're supporting people up and down the ticket. I'm also going to continue to have a presence speaking for the values that we all came together around in this effort, the things that brought us all to the table, the rules of the road in terms of how we believe campaigning should be done, and the specific policy areas that we know are so important, our vision of how freedom and democracy and security can be supported and really get the leadership that we need on the road ahead. The stakes could not have been higher, and then they got higher. That's how I feel about what's happening right now. And that's why it's more important than ever for us to stay strong, to find new ways to be involved, since it's not as straightforward as just going down in person to an event. I continue to be so proud of the community of supporters that we have, not just everything that you did in the campaign, which I'll never be able to thank you enough for, but also seeing online and through social media the different things that Team Pete are doing, how each of you have found ways to lift one another up, to be involved, to stay engaged, and that's only going to be more important. So I'm really excited to be with you. I know that, and this is new for us, I think we got the technology and the protocol set up that we'll be able to take live questions from folks on the call, and really looking forward to jumping into that conversation. So I'll kick it back to Marcus to guide us through the chat.
Great. All right. Well, we've got a couple of questions. Do we have Wendy from Loveland? Wendy, can we make sure you're unmuted and ask your question?
Mute myself. There I go. I'm good. Hi, Mayor Pete. My question is,
Hello.
There's so much misinformation out there. Hi, can you hear me? This is Wendy from Loveland.
Yes, I got you.
Can you hear me? Wendy from Loveland. Hi.
Hi, Wendy.
And hi, Mayor
Go
Pete.
ahead.
There
Yes,
seems to be a lot
we
of
can hear you.
confusion
Go right
about as everyone gets ready to reopen their states and their communities. There's a lot of misinformation about how important the testing is, so that we know where we are in the COVID-19. It just depends on who you're talking to as to whether they feel it's important or not. I'm in northern Colorado. Governor Polis spoke to everyone yesterday, telecommuting, and basically it sounded as though the testing of trying to test everyone in every community is just not going to be doable. How do we know that when we open up, that it's going to really be safe to open up? Is it just the data that we follow?
So first and foremost, you're right. There's a lot of misinformation going on out there. So it's so important to listen to trusted and objective leaders. I got to know Governor Polis during the campaign. I think he's terrific, and really appreciate the leadership that he's showing, as so many governors have. If you look through my Twitter feed, you'll see earlier today I tweeted about a report that came out from a team that I've been working on, based at the Safra Center for Ethics, but involving experts from around the country from different disciplines and different fields. And what is emerging there is that widespread, massive testing is the only way we can fully get back to normal. So in the meantime, there may be areas where it becomes safe to begin partial reopening, but ultimately, in my view, in order for us to be able to safely reopen this summer, as we might be able to do, we're going to have to do a lot of testing. As a matter of fact, the experts in the report that I would definitely encourage you to take a look at say that we would need between 5 million and 20 million tests a day. That sounds well, obviously it is a lot, and it sounds like an almost unbelievable number. We could do it if we took certain steps. As a country, we would need to step up production of tests in a way that's comparable to wartime production boards in World War II that made it possible for us to have enough Jeeps and rubber tires and airplanes in order to deliver. That could be done. And a framework has been put forward for how to do it. It'll take money, but the billions of dollars that would take to deliver testing at that scale are dramatically less than even a few more weeks than necessary of physical distancing. And so we really need to find a way as a country to mobilize so that we can do that testing. Now, the testing is just the beginning. We've also got to be able to do the contact tracing of people who test positive. And that's why the experts estimate we'll need to bring on about 100,000 people more to participate in that effort. Think, for example, of all the people being hired in neighborhoods around the country as census enumerators every 10 years. It's kind of like that. And there may be a role for national service organizations to help make that possible. So my point is that this is an all hands on deck effort, and we do need access to that testing data to really know whether it's safe to reopen, because there are so many people who have it who don't know that they have it. There are a few places around the world, one part of Iceland, another part of Italy, where they've actually begun testing the entire population of an area or randomly sampling testing, so that soon we hope we'll get better numbers about how many people are symptomatic. In some groups that have been tested, fully half of the people who were positive did not have any symptoms at all. And so that number may or may not hold for the big picture. But what we know is that this shows us the importance of testing. And unfortunately, the president is not showing leadership on this, but that doesn't mean that it can't happen. And so I'm continuing to work with this group of experts to link them to mayors around the country who I've come to know through the community of mayors and get their feedback. By the way, we're talking about mayors from both parties who don't get caught up in the partisan nonsense and don't get sucked into this White House's rhetoric. Because the reality is that this virus doesn't care what party you're in, and it's as dangerous to people who voted one way as it is to people who voted another. So bottom line, massive testing with a lot of contact tracing is the road to opening. And if we do it, then we no longer have to be in this debate where some people are saying, reopen now, which is incredibly dangerous, and others are fearing that we have to go through this economic pain forever. There is a way to avoid that choice, and that is through massively increased testing.
Great. Thank you, Mayor. Our next question comes from Baron from Austin. Baron, can you try to unmute your line? Are you on the line?
Hey, Marcus. We are going to come back to Baron. We're just finding his microphone, but we have Ryan from Boston. Ryan, you should. You might need to unmute yourself there too. All right, we'll give Ryan a sec. Thanks everyone for your flexibility and for helping us manage this tonight. Let's see. Linda, we are going to come to you. Linda from Brighton. See here.
Yes, I'm here.
All right, Linda, if you are there. Yes, gotcha, loud and clear.
Hey, I'm here. Okay. First of all, hello, Mayor Pete. I was really inspired by your campaign.
Hello, how are you? Thanks
I'm
for joining
fine.
us.
How are you? Thank you. I was really inspired by your campaign, and I was thinking of all sorts of, you're welcome. And I was thinking of all sorts of policy questions to ask you, but I decided, especially with the wall of books behind you, to ask what are some of the books that you've been reading during quarantine?
Well, thanks for asking. One of my favorite subjects, and these bookshelves represent my triumph in furniture assembly. The first one came in, took a better part of a Saturday to put it together, and now I'm getting pretty proficient at these. And organizing a library that's been accumulating in the house for some time. It feels good to be able to have the time to read something longer than a campaign memo or an email or a tweet. And there are a lot of things that are really relevant. I'll give you kind of an insider thing, which is I've realized that when I appear on TV from this seat, people pay a lot of attention to the books that are behind me. And at first they were just randomly arranged because I was cleaning the room, but I've decided this is going to be my shelf of stuff that I'm looking at right now, either new books or books that I think have new meaning at the moment. So just a few things that I would point to right now. Sorry, you got me started on a favorite subject.
Oh, that's great.
There's a book here called The Public Option, and it's not just about the public option for healthcare. The authors actually developed a general theory about public options. They pointed out that the post office is a public option, and one, by the way, that we need to fund in order to get the services we need. Public libraries represent a kind of public option. And so it's a really smart look more broadly at policy issues that can be solved with a quality public option. I just got a sneak peek at a book that's not going to come out until June, but it's by Bob Putnam, the author of Bowling Alone, who's been, I think, one of America's most important thinkers on how we feel as individual communities or get isolated. It's called The Upswing, and what he's done and a team of researchers he's worked with have assessed how not just economic inequality, but social and political and cultural cohesion all were at a really low point in about the 1880s, the Gilded Age. And then through a lot of policy work, got better and better by the middle of the century, and then started getting worse again. That's kind of, for example, combating inequality. This is the curve. You start the clock in the 1880s, and we're kind of living back down here in a period that resembles a lot of the problems that we had 100 or 120 years ago. So I'm just dipping into it, but I think it's pretty compelling. This is a good time for novels. It's not on my shelf here, but the third novel in the Wolf Hall series has come out by Hilary Mantel. It's about England at the time of Henry VIII. It's great if you're interested in politics, or if you're not. It's just a great read because it's very psychological, but also timely. And then this one's got my attention. It came out a few years ago. It's called Debt. It's a history of the idea of debt. And the author, from the very beginning, talks about some really provocative things. Goes back 5,000 years. He demonstrates that the concept of debt probably existed before the concept of money. The reason this is important is because, well, one reason it's important is we're going through such economic upheaval, right? And of course, a lot of the biggest debates that we've had in 2020 and beyond have been about debt, medical debt, student debt, national debt. And we're through the looking glass now when it comes to just how profoundly our economic realities are going to change. So I think I picked that book up years ago, but I think it's probably going to have new meaning right now. So those are a few that have my attention, and I'm always eager to geek out with supporters on books that might have your attention. So I'll keep an eye on the chat window or elsewhere for ideas you might have on books that I might like.
Great, thank you so much. Very interesting.
All right. Thank you, Linda. Next up, we have Nicole from Green Bay. Nicole, are you on the line? And if you are, please unmute yourself. I can read the question for you. So following on from that, Nicole from Green Bay asks, Nicole asked, what have you recently been enjoying that you didn't expect to like?
Doing dishes. It's a chore, but actually just being home, and especially because Chatston, it turns out, is a wonderful cook, and so our division of labor is he does the really creative, demanding part that you could easily mess up. I do the simpler part. So it's I don't know. There's kind of a zen to it. Maybe the fact that I rarely came into contact with dishes, let alone my own kitchen during the campaign. Most of our meals were actually in vehicles because we were moving around so quickly, and so just eating off the table instead of my lap in an SUV, let alone being able to. I know it's strange. I hated doing the dishes when I was a kid, but since the question was things I did not expect to like, that's one of them. I'm also beginning to make my peace with furniture assembly, like I said earlier, and sometimes those basic daily things that when you become a presidential candidate are no longer available to you. There's a certain effect that's positive from being reunited with them.
All right. So our next question, again, we'll try Baron from Austin. Baron asked, how can we rebuild our economy along new and fairer lines? And what do you think of government bailouts for large corporations?
Well, that's really the question of the day, isn't it? Look, it's not only impossible, but it's also undesirable to go back to the old economic arrangements we had. They were unsustainable to begin with. Let me point out one example that I think is really interesting and important. So the Senate passed the emergency economic package. One of the things they did was they made sure that they supported unemployment insurance funding enough that everybody would be able to live, at least for the period of time that they were covered. Some people pointed out that for some workers, those unemployment benefits were more than they had been making at their jobs. This is not evidence that the unemployment benefits were too generous. They really were set based on what it takes to get by. It's showing that what people were actually making in their jobs, even full-time workers working very hard in some geographies, was not enough to live on. And so what we're seeing is, even in the course of rising to respond to this emergency, we're seeing just how unsustainable some of the things that we had come to accept really are. And this is a chance to do something about it. Again, partly because we should, partly because we have to. And in that, across the terrifying danger of this situation, there's also a huge amount of opportunity. There's an opportunity here to rebuild our economy on fairer terms. But that means making sure that the voices of workers are heard. It means making sure the way that we compensate people corresponds to how much value they're creating in the economy. You know, the very same workers who are being described as disposable, or at least treated as disposable, are now proving to be absolutely indispensable and literally called essential by orders that tell them they need to keep working. We're talking about farm workers. We're talking about healthcare workers, not just doctors and nurses, but people in those really lower paid positions. We're talking about the people who make it possible for cities to function. Obviously, as a mayor, I've got a soft spot for the people who are out there every day picking up the trash and making sure that the sewers flow and that our streets are paved. Our first responders. So many people are, I think, demonstrating the value and the dignity of work in an economy that has come to reward wealth over work. This is our chance to do something about that. Look, a lot of the old assumptions are going out the window. They have to. We're revealing, as we already knew, but in new ways, that our way of delivering healthcare needs to go through tremendous change to really serve everybody. And as for the question about bailouts, look, if any corporation expects to be supported by taxpayers, there needs to be an understanding that will be transparent, that the funding will be directed toward the workers who are there and focused on keeping employees okay. That there's got to be oversight, and that the American taxpayer expects something in return. We're seeing that a lot of the small businesses were left behind. As you may know, there's a bill that's working its way through as we speak on Capitol Hill. I believe the Senate came to terms, and now it's largely going to come to the House. This is a chance to make sure that's framed up in a way that the support actually gets where it's most needed. Because if it just routes through the banks, what's going to happen is the businesses with the best relationships with the banks get the first dibs on the funding. But this is more than just how we get through the next few weeks and the stimulus funding. This is about how to make sure that whatever we come out of this with is stronger and more sustainable, as well as more equitable than what we had before. And because it's not going to be as simple as just rewinding to the status quo, this is our chance in the same way that every once in a while the country hits a moment that really transforms everything. This is our chance to do something. We got you.
Hey, Pete, how are you? Great to see you.
Welcome.
So my question's a bit personal because my husband is actually running for Congress in Massachusetts. He's running against an incumbent Democrat, and I'm kind of hoping you can give some insight into what your endorsement process will be, as well as when you think you're going to start rolling out some endorsements.
Yeah, so definitely invite his campaign to reach out to the Win the Era team led by Marcus, who's been moderating this call. And there are several things that we're going to be looking at. We're looking for leaders who look to the future with the kind of generational energy that was an important part of our campaign. I'm looking for leaders who are pioneering. Sometimes that means being a little different from some of your constituents in terms of your approach or your style, bringing something new to a district. I'm looking for people who've demonstrated the qualities that were so important to us in the campaign: commitment to service, a belief in the concept of belonging, a campaign that organizes itself in ways that rhyme with what we called our rules of the road, the values that were so important in our race. And so that process is underway. And would certainly welcome you and your husband's campaign, and also anybody on this call who is following, whether you're personally involved with it or just have an eye on it. I, of all people, should live up to the understanding that not every great candidate is somebody that you've heard of or who has national attention. So we know that sometimes an out-of-the-way race could produce a phenomenal leader. And we'll be excited to hear about these candidates and to support as many as we can.
That sounds great.
And I think we got time. Thanks, Ryan. I think we have time for one more question. It is a question that's been similar to a lot that we've seen in the group chat, but it's from Judy from Hollis. Judy, are you on the line? If you are, unmute your line. All right, well, I'll ask Judy's question. It's, what can I do to help support Win the Era besides donations, which I've already done, thank you, Judy, at the local, state, and federal levels?
All right, well, yes, first of all, thank you, Judy, for contributing. And there are several things that are important to us. So first of all, I'm glad you mentioned local, state, and federal. Because, again, obviously we care about federal offices from the presidency on through to Congress, but think about how important it is, for example, with democracy on the line, in a country where most of our elections are organized by either county officials or state officials or both. Our democracy is being handled by people, some of whom are on the ballot this November. Just one example of why it's so important at level. And so in addition to obviously needing resources to work with, we will be lifting up the names of candidates that we think are really important to support. Obviously, it'll be a limited number. We won't be able to actively endorse everybody who deserves support, but a spread of people who really represent those values. As we release those lists, we'll strongly encourage anybody who is part of this community of supporters to also come through and support those campaigns directly. If it's anywhere near you, you can knock on doors for them. If it's somebody that you think might be connected up to a particular community of supporters that you have access to, you could make that link. So part of it's about funding, but there's a lot more to it than that. Also, Win the Era is not only going to be about supporting individual campaigns. Part of why we're building a nonprofit organization, a 501c4, is to make sure that we're lifting up issues that are important. And so we will be looking to you to help spread good information about the response to the pandemic. For example, again, this body of work that I've been working this week to lift up about the relationship between testing and reopening. But also the issues that we're going to continue seeking to give voice to, questions of racial equity that were addressed by the Douglas Plan that are very much at stake in elections around the country. A vision for national security that understands, especially in the COVID era, that 21st century threats from pandemics to cybersecurity problems to climate change deserve more attention, and many other issues that I'm going to be working to lift up, helping to spread the word. We have upcoming efforts on the whether it's media appearances or eventually we hope being able to get back to more in-person gatherings as soon as it's safe. So safe to say that there are a lot of ways to be involved. Please keep an eye on emails that come through on social media feeds, and you'll see more and more of the work that we're doing to really make good on the values that brought us together in the campaign.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Mayor. And thank you, everybody, for joining us this evening. We look forward to talking to you all again soon. Have a good night.
So great seeing you. Thanks so much for joining us, everyone. Thank you.